Hello and welcome back to Karma Stories. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have some stories for you from the Malicious Compliance subreddit. It's Saturday, we're just gonna leave you all alone and jump right into the stories. Everybody have a wonderful day. This story comes to us from Puzzle-Headed Data 829. You want these ads done 3 months in advance? No problem, boss. Longtime lurker, but I finally have something to share that's happened within the last few months. I work as a senior graphic designer for a company for 5 years now. Originally, it was only a team of 3, a marketing manager, a marketing executive, and myself. The former 2 have since quit, and you'll find out later why. A huge part of my job is to handle a huge advertising schedule in a project management system, for which I design, print, digital ads for. Enter my difficult micromanaging manager. He's the VP of Sales and Marketing, who's been with the company for 30 plus years. His way of quality control is to force all our marketing materials to go through an approval process in our PMS in which everyone else has to give their feedback, and only then will my manager give the final sign-off once it reaches him. On top of that, he insists on being copied on every notification for every single step of the way. So every single ad I produced had to be sent through our PMS while tagging the product managers and proofreaders. Those individuals would then comment feedback for changes needed, or if the ad is approved, they'd mark it complete and then send it along to the next person. It would end with this micromanaging manager who'd have the final say on whether it's good to be sent out or not. Sometimes the process would be flawless as everyone would approve it the first time with no changes needed. But when it got to my manager, he'd reject it and I'd have to do it over pending his remarks. The thing with our PMS is that you can see timestamps of when people viewed updates. He's on our project board, so he gets all the updates, and he could have easily interceded earlier and let me know if changes were needed to pass his check, so I'd not waste my time. But because of the way he is, he only wants to see the final drafts after everyone else sees them. Everyone else always seems to move things along in a timely fashion, but when it gets to my manager, he'd just let it sit, and then you'd have to constantly check to see if he marked it off. When I pushed back and stated how arduous this all is, his tone-deaf reply was to have it done 3 months in advance. He also insisted that the ads I produced have to look different each time for each publication's insertion order. So after 4 years of handling all this by myself, I was barely meeting deadlines, and the quality of my work started slipping as I was making really stupid mistakes. Every few months, I would ask my manager if we are going to hire an additional designer for our department since we're doing more marketing, and every year I'd hear, "It's not in our budget right now." Things came to a head during one of my biannual reviews, where I told my manager bluntly, in front of HR, that we desperately needed to hire an additional designer, as there was no way for me to hit the 3 months ahead goal that he keeps parroting. He actually asked me, and I quote, "Is it typical for companies to have more than one graphic designer?" I'm dead serious. I showed how I handled everything by myself as best as I could at that point, and I was getting burnt out. For those that may ask why I stay, they compensate me very well without having to commute into a major metropolitan city. A golden handcuff situation, if you will. By the end of the meeting, my manager finally caved and gave me permission to hire an additional designer who started with us this past January. While showing him the ropes on our design system, he told me the manager said something snarky to him along the lines of, "I never imagined having to hire 2 designers. You guys should have no problem being 3 months ahead on ads now." Are you kidding me? Over the years, I watched my manager as he hired a plethora of account executives and replacements for our department, most of whom quit within months under his watch. But he's gonna give me crap for needing 1 designer after I made things work for 4 years by myself? I was so infuriated by his comments that I decided he wants ads done 3 months in advance. Okay, bet. I trained the new designer on our approach to the advertising schedule in the PMS and the ins and outs of the approval process, and we went to work. We both proceeded to bury my manager in notifications as we churned out ad after ad after ad, pushing items through the pipeline with my manager receiving notifications on every single update. When the tasks ended at him and we got no response, we set up automations to ping him every hour, calling for his approval. We also would send detailed weekly reports stating our progress and also made it inherently clear to mention our goal was to be 3 months ahead of deadlines. By this past May, in time for one of my biannual reviews, my manager made an announcement. He announced my coworker, the marketing assistant, would be promoted to the vacant marketing manager position. Furthermore, they would now be handling the advertising schedule and be the final point person going forward. My manager also asked to have all notifications for him to be removed, as he didn't have the bandwidth anymore to monitor it and is taking a step back from overseeing us. We collectively broke my manager after only 5 months of doing exactly what he asked. And I've got to say, things have improved greatly so far. Our new marketing manager is very laid back, as we're still getting things done ahead of schedule, and he is really good at what he does. We've also since hired 2 more additional employees for our department, and we've been steadily growing. My newly promoted coworker recently joked with me and the junior designer about how he wanted to go over the advertising schedule for the next year with our manager, but he elected not to see anything and fully trusted my coworker to handle it completely on his own. Funny how that works. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Nerd is a Compliment. It says, I love blasting the manager with notifications. If you do your work in a day and it takes them a week to approve, it's not your fault that you didn't hit a schedule. It's theirs. OP says that this manager was micromanaging, but it seems to me like they were pretty hands-off and just not paying attention to even their own work. I love the fact that they set up an automation to ping them every hour, calling them out on not having their approvals done. That was absolutely amazing, and probably led to that person not wanting to do that anymore, thus changing the system, hiring somebody else to take over that job. This story comes to us from Where's My Chin? Do all the work yourself or get 0%. In high school, I was in a science class that I did very well in. I was top of the class and scored nearly 100% on every test and assignment. The teacher assigned a big group project that would take about a week to complete with a team of 4 students. Groups were randomly assigned, and unfortunately, I was paired up with 3 kids who were barely passing the class. In class, we are given time to make plans together as a group to divide up work, examine the instructions, schedule times outside of school to meet up, etc. It was at this point my teammates decided to tell me that they weren't going to do any work on the project. I asked them why, and they said they knew I really cared about my grade, so they figured I would do it on my own. They were so lazy, they were banking on the fact that I wouldn't take my own grade, so they could benefit off of my hard work when I inevitably got a good score on the project. I was pissed and said that was unfair. They dug in and said, too bad, now you either do this project yourself or you get a 0%. Cue Malicious Compliance. Now, I could have gone to the teacher, and he probably would have sorted this out, but a better idea struck me. So I said, fine, you win, I'll do what you say. They smiled smugly and thought that was that. But you see, this teacher had a policy that at the end of the semester, your lowest grade, excluding finals, would be taken off your record. So if you forgot to turn in an assignment or did really bad on one test, you got a mulligan, so it wouldn't ruin your final grade. I had never done poorly on an assignment all year, so I never needed my mulligan. However, I knew that these crapheads all did. If they got a big fat 0 on a crucial assignment, they would probably fail the class. So I did exactly as they instructed. I did no work on the project all week, just sat on it and bided my time. At the beginning of the next week, all the students turned in their assignments. My team watched as I sat in my chair unmoving. Finally, one said, "Hey, OP, aren't you gonna turn in the project?" "Oh, I didn't do the project." They were shocked and asked why the heck I didn't do it. "You said do all the work or get a 0%. I choose 0%. They were all royally pissed. They all had to do credit recovery over the summer. They hated my guts, but I couldn't have cared less. It was the most satisfying failing grade in my entire life. Jumping into the comments on this one, we have one from a user called HonestPepper8229. It says, "Sometimes the nuclear option is the only option. Deliciously applied in this case." I've been in many group projects over the years, whether it's at school or even in training for some jobs, and the one thing I've learned in every group project is that the only person you can truly rely on is yourself, not the other people in the group at all. Come to think of it, when I die, I want the people I did group projects with to lower me into my grave, just so they can let me down one last time. This story comes to us from Illustrious Report 482. You want the server down during business hours? You got it. I used to work IT at a mid-sized logistics company. Our warehouse ran 24/7, but the corporate office was open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. I was responsible for maintaining the internal server that handled everything from payroll to inventory management to shipping labels. One Monday morning, I got an email from a higher-up, let's call her Karen, demanding that we take the server offline immediately for scheduled maintenance. Now, I had scheduled that maintenance for Sunday evening, sent out 3 notices, and got no objections. But Karen hadn't read those emails and was now insisting we do it right now during her working hours. I replied, taking the server offline during business hours will temporarily halt access to the shipping system, inventory, time tracking, and payroll processing. Confirm you'd like me to proceed. She replied, and I quote, yes, you should be working on my schedule, get it done now. Alright, malicious compliance time. I looped in the warehouse manager and let him know the system would be down per Karen's urgent request. Then I pulled the plug at exactly 10:30 a.m. Within 15 minutes, the office was in chaos. No one could clock in or out, print labels, track shipments, or even check inventory levels. Phones were ringing off the hook. The CFO stormed into my office asking what the heck was going on. I just showed him the email thread. Less than 30 minutes later, Karen came to my office red-faced and yelling. I calmly pointed out that she had approved the server downtime in writing despite warnings. I offered to restore access early, but reminded her it would take time to reboot and check for errors from the forced shutdown. Fallout? Oh yes. She got dragged into a meeting with the COO and CTO that afternoon. From what I heard, it didn't go well for her. After that, all urgent IT requests from management had to go through a change management process with multiple approvals. I also got a little bonus on my next paycheck for handling the outage with professionalism. Sometimes, the best way to teach someone why we have procedures is to let them break one, once. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Tquilla. It says, and that is how you educate some people. OP responded and said, absolutely. Sometimes experience is the best teacher. Glad it worked out in the end. What is it that we drive home here all the time? If you've just told somebody to do something and they ask you for it in writing, maybe you need to review what you've just asked them to do because they're calling you out on it and they want a paper trail. This story comes to us from Gold AU 2025. No more substances in the workplace? Okay. My pet peeve is poorly written policy. If you are going to go to the effort of writing the rules, you may as well do it properly and not get the intern to do it. My wife came home one day and showed a printout of her company's new workplace fitness for work policy that had been sent to all employees to sign and return. My wife, being my wife, decided to run it past me before she signed, because I am, well, me. It was mostly an amateurish document that was ultimately a waste of ink and trees, but it did have a little bit to say about substances in the workplace, which was essentially, do not come to work under the influence of substances or alcohol, and do not bring substances or alcohol to work. I told her not to sign until they at the very least defined what substances were. Were they including Tylenol, antibiotics, Ritalin, or just the illegal ones and recreational pharmaceuticals? Fast forward a couple of days, version 2.0 of the document is presented. They fleshed out the substances policy a little, basically using the dictionary definition, something along the lines of a non-prescription substance which has a psychological or mood-altering effect when ingested or otherwise introduced into the body. Okay, time for malicious compliance. She signed and presented it to HR the next day and went about her work. During the morning, there were increasing amounts of confusion and frustrated loud voices in the office. Apparently, it only took an hour before zero work was being done, and there was a crowd of workers around the break room. The manager eventually zeroed in on my wife, apparently the only one who wasn't looking confused, and asked if she had anything to do with stealing all the coffee in the break room. She admitted it was her, and pointed out the new fitness for work policy, which prohibited the consumption of mood-altering substances in the workplace. He tried to argue that it was just coffee, but she pointed out that it was definitely mood-altering substance, as per company policy, and as such was not allowed to be on the premises without a prescription. She'd made her point. She retrieved the coffee she'd stashed in the storeroom, the office mood was altered, and the company actually commissioned a functional fitness for work policy based on the published government guidelines. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called You Aren't Really There. It says, caffeine is the world's #1 most used psychoactive substance. Another commenter down below called Griffy Nicky said, I used to have a sign in my cubicle under my Keurig that said, hot, fresh, socially acceptable addiction. I feel like your wife and I would get along just fine, laugh out loud. I love how in this story no work was getting done because there was no coffee to be had. A huge group of people in the break room crowded around because they can't get their caffeine. That right there is addiction, my friends. This story comes to us from Common Employee. Supervisor said, don't just type BRB. So I told the whole team I had to poop. So this recently happened in my call center type job. My brand new supervisor, promoted for all the wrong reasons, wasn't exactly qualified. I could write a whole post on that, but the gist is, she only got promoted because she was friends with the boss, and is always giving him advice on the women he dates. Anyway, we had a Teams chat where we kept each other updated and asked for help with things. Normal procedure was simple. If you stepped away, we would typically just type BRB, so everyone knew you weren't available for calls. Did this for years with no issues. Well, new supervisor decides that's not good enough. She needs to assert control and dominance. She announced to us in one-on-one combos that we all had to start giving specific reasons for why we were stepping away. I told her I wasn't really comfortable announcing to the entire team every time I had to use the bathroom. She basically shrugged and said, it's the rule, we need transparency, so I know what everyone's doing. Okay, we had no issues for years, but whatever she says goes, I guess. The very next time nature called, instead of a boring BRB, I typed BRB, going to poop in the bathroom. Immediately she PM'd me in Teams saying that was not professional. I reminded her she told us to be specific, and I was just following directions. After that, others started joining in. Some favorites were BRB, gonna stand in front of the urinal and do an impression of a water fountain. BRB, going to blow my nose to try to dislodge this giant booger. Within a week, the supervisor started telling us we didn't need to be so specific when stepping away from our desks. Like, yeah, we know. I only have one comment to make on this one, and it's a question for all of you. So let me know in the comments down below. Is this story and what OP typed into the chat the true definition of for shits and giggles? Alright, we're gonna end this one here. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow us on your preferred podcasting platform. Remember, if you're on Spotify, you can rotate your phone and get video over there now as well. I thank you all for watching and listening. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.